In the last video, we talked about lists and how we can use array lists or linked lists to make our data collection and data storage a little bit more flexible than we might have if we just use an array. Now, one of the challenges that we run into here is that because we don't know how things are working internally, we might not be accessing values the most efficient way. Let's go back into our input test class here. So if we looked at the bottom of our program, our main method that we had written, you can see here that we use this for loop, and we talked about how when every time we get a value from a linked list, to retrieve that, it actually has to start from the first value and iterate all the way through to find that last one. So the first time you get, if you get 0, you're getting the first one. That's not too expensive. You get 1, has to go to 0 and then 1. And if you get 2, you have to go to 0, then 1, then 2. So as you get more and more high values, you run into this problem where your get method takes a lot longer than you might want it to. Now, fortunately, Java has something built in that lets us deal with this. We can use java.util.iterator. Java.util.iterator allows us to iterate through any type of list in a very efficient way. So we can just change this code here. We'll go ahead and use iterator integer iterator is equal to values.iterator. Now, all we have to do is use a while loop, and we can iterate through this pretty simply. While iterator.hasNext system.out.println or print values, iterator.next plus a space. So now we're doing essentially the same thing, but we're doing it in a much more efficient fashion. So if I write this out and I compile and I run it, you'll see that it works functionally the same way. No real change there. But the amount of time that's taking is actually a lot less because we're telling the system now we're going to iterate through this in an efficient way. And what happens is that the linked list actually implements or builds an iterator internally that does a better job of returning values one by one. Now, fortunately, this might seem a little cumbersome. Java has a simpler way of doing this, so you don't actually have to use the iterator explicitly. You can also use the for each loop. And to do that, we can just say for integer I, and we'll use a colon here in values, and then we can just take all of these lines out, and instead of using iterator, which we haven't declared now, we'll just use I, which is a nice shorthand for having to use that iterator. We can just use this for each loop that allows us to iterate using the built-in iterator through the same loop. So if we write that out and we compile, we run, you'll see we have functionally the same program. But now it's using a little bit more of an efficient mechanism and a little bit simpler way to iterate through the values. So iterators are going to come in handy over and over again, but usually nowadays we'll use them with this for each loop that makes things a lot simpler. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to practice your coding.